The purpose of this show is to guide you to realign with habits that get you to live the life you've always dreamed of. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with Jesse Ewing. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle, where you can access your full potential right now. Finally break free from destructive habits. That dream life, if you want it, you can have it. This is where you transform your health, mind, business, and relationships. Or do nothing and keep your life the way it is. But if you're ready for change, you're in the right place. This is where you're gonna learn how to live a habit-based lifestyle. You are tuning in to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Jesse Ewing. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle. Let's go.
What's up, guys? Jesse, Habit-Based Lifestyle. I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Habit-Based Lifestyle and Business Show. And today we're going to be talking about finding your strengths. So over the last couple weeks, I've been going through a program with my wife that's about marriage reset. But one of the things that we did is a strength finder on the strengths that we have as a couple individually, and then going into those, just being able to discuss those. And I think one of the cool things is really finding out what are my strengths, and typically a lot of times they complement our spouse, and theirs complements ours. So they're not usually the same. Opposites usually attract. And so they're very different, but being able to discuss those has been a cool part of the process. But today I want to talk about finding your strengths in business and life. And we're going to talk about my number one strength, which is competition. And we're going to talk about how that influences the way that I do business and the way that I do life. We're also going to talk about how, we can have strengths, or we can have a strength, but how if we, leverage it too much or use it too much, then it can also be detrimental to us. And so, I think a lot of times we have a tendency to look at our strengths and look at our weaknesses. And a lot of times people say, listen, like try to work on your weaknesses. And I actually think that in business, we don't want to look at we want to know what our weaknesses are, but we don't necessarily want to focus on those. We want to really focus on our strengths, and we want to get into a position in our business where we can focus on our strengths and put ourselves in a position where we can leverage those strengths to really build our business going forward. Where I see a lot of business owners mess up in their business is they're trying to work on their weaknesses so much that they never actually get to dive into their true strengths, and they spend all their time running around trying to, make their weaknesses stronger, and they end up actually weakening their strengths. And so they don't see the fruit of that, or they don't see the results of that. One of the things that I see and want to really leverage is like, how can I get into a position to where I'm using that competitive advantage or competition as a bigger strength in my business, and maybe bringing in people around me to support my weaknesses. So they're actually here supporting my weaknesses, and that's leveraging my strength even more and multiplying that effect of that. And also inside of my organization, bringing up those weaknesses. And so we're working on this together and bringing all these up together. And so really it's a complement to each other. And so, as you go into this today, I want you to think about, if you've never done Strength Finder, it's a great way for you to find out what your strengths are. They give you a full report for like $49. But it talks specifically we're going to talk about mine. And then I want to talk about how I use this in my business as a competitive advantage, how I use this as a place in my business. And so number one for me, like I said, was competition. And, it says, hey, how do you thrive in business? You measure your progress against the performance of others. You strive to win first place and even revel in contests. So I remember, in high school or even young age, it was like, I could think of when I started boxing was at 10 years old, sports very early on. And I always, it was like first place or no place. And that was kind of how I thought of everything. And there was no second, third, fourth, fifth place. There was no, there wasn't any other option than that. And I can remember, whether it be in boxing, whether it be in football, wrestling, track, many of the events that I would do or sports I would do, there was this constant need to work on my performance, work on my game. And that was what I focused on. So, summertime, I was constantly working on how do I get better at baseball? How do I get better at football? Other times a year, how do I get better at boxing? How do I get better at, wrestling? How do I get better at, track and field? Whatever sport I was in, I was constantly studying ways that you could get better. Now, back then, there was no internet. And so, it was like reading Sports Illustrated, reading sports magazines, reading, books. I was always fascinated with, how people showed up in sports, their mindset, different things like that. How could they optimize their level of game and level of play? And that was where I was always thinking. And so I thought about what are ways that, if you're measuring performance of others, then you're comparing and, you hear a lot of people sometimes say, well, comparison is the thief of joy. The only person you're competing with is yourself, kind of all these things. But I believe that today more than ever, we are comparing ourselves to other people on, social media more than ever. And what's crazy is people are telling you all over the place, listen, don't compare yourself to others. And I believe that that's BS. But I want to put a little spin on this because I believe that there's a competitive advantage that you can have by comparing yourself to others and comparing yourself to maybe where you've been. So, I look back over, the last 20 years, I look back over the last 15 almost as being an entrepreneur, being able to compare myself where I was 15 years ago as an entrepreneur to where I am today offers me the ability and insight to look back at where I've come from, where I've been to where I am today. Now, there's also comparing myself and seeing myself where other entrepreneurs are starting out today. That gives me a competitive advantage of knowing, hey, I know exactly where you've been. I know the things that you're going through right now because I've been through those too myself, and I can offer them some insight. I can offer them a competitive advantage to seeing things and to helping them get to where they want to be a lot quicker. Then there's comparing ourselves, who we are today. And, I think the big thing is comparing ourselves with who we are today is the people surrounding you. Who are the people around me? What's their performance? So a lot of times in business, it's like, hey, you are the 5 people you hang around the most. And if that's true, then we would say that we're comparing ourselves with the 5 people we hang around the most. And those people are either going to help us rise up, or those people are going to help us or hurt us in kind of falling down. But either way, we are going to be comparing ourselves to them. And so, if I'm hanging out with 5 millionaires, chances are I'm going to raise, or multimillionaires, I'm going to raise my level of performance to them versus if I'm hanging out with, guys making $10,000 a year, I'm going to drop my level of performance based off who I'm hanging out because there's a comparison in that game. And so, even if you turn on social media, even if you turn on, anything that has to do with any type of comparison, you're going to look at your progress or performance based on others. And then there's comparing yourself with who you want to become. And I think there's who you want to become. I think what's important is we have people around us that are farther ahead in certain places. Like, I have people I'd probably compare myself to in business. Like, hey, I'd like to be where this person is in business one day, or I'd like to be able to kind of like be where they are, whether it be financially, whether it be, in their faith, whether it be in their fitness, whether it be in their finances, or whether it be in their marriage or relationship. I don't think that's a bad thing. What can happen though is we compare ourselves so much to other people, it either paralyzes us or keeps us from doing what we ultimately want to do. And so, with that is there's always the comparison. People always use the example of like, hey, compare yourself to, Jesus and be more like him. If we're trying to be more like him or be more like God, then technically we're saying, listen, we're going to compare ourselves to him, to God, to Jesus. And so we are going to compare. And so there's a natural tendency of comparison, no matter where we go, no matter what we do, no matter what we look. Now, some may be different. For me, challenges are things that drive me. When, I see situations or I see, hey, somebody may be doing something I may want to do. I want to get into their world. I want to understand what it took for them to get to their success. I want to evaluate the things that they're doing and the things that I'm doing and the changes that I need to make. And so a lot of this is driven by the talents. We intentionally, I want to read some of the stuff that it talks about in this, because it says, listen, you're driven by your talents. You intentionally increase your chances of being the best by diving into projects and working industriously. You regularly compare your scores, rankings, ratings, outcomes, or performances to those of others. You are quite motivated to participate in activities in which one person can finish in first place. So I think about, business is how is my business showing up maybe compared to someone else's? What are things that I can change up in my business, whether it be the performance of clients, performance of others, the outcomes, the results even our clients are getting? How can we make that better? Chances are good that you traditionally practice using your skills and knowledge. You regularly expand your knowledge base in selected subjects. So one of the things that I really struggle with in school is if it wasn't something that I cared about or thought I could use to make myself better as an athlete, or just things that I was interested in, I had really zero desire to do it. But if it was geared towards how can this make me a better athlete? How can this make me, nowadays a better husband, father, leader, businessman? I'm into doing it, but outside of that, I'm not really interested. And it says, not surprisingly, you aim to increase your chances of being a winner in a variety of contests. These rivalries can either be obvious to you or involved or not only known to you. So a lot of times I can remember my gym is back when I had those was almost like building a case or building a competition with other facilities in the area in my own mind, or even other gyms in the area. And that was a way that would get me to constantly keep working. So it was like, man, I had this like silent competition, but it was a way to get me to constantly work, constantly grow. And it would have this feeling that someone was always kind of like chasing you. So I didn't have time. I couldn't take a day off. I couldn't do some of these other things I wanted to do because that meant someone was catching up to me. And in some ways that can obviously be detrimental. In other ways that can help push you to that next level. It says here, it's very likely that you usually discover that vying for real and even imaginary first place victories make your job or scholarly pursuits much more exhilarating. So there you go. So there's an imaginary first place. There's an imaginary contest or challenge. And it could just be me challenging myself, and instinctively you normally toil for hours to produce top-notch results. Being the very best at something is quite important to you. You have little, if any, tolerance for mediocrity, especially about the things that matter to you the most. So I'm not interested in being mediocre. I'm not interested in mediocre things. In fact, if I'm not interested in it, I just won't do it. I do the things that, are things that I want to do that will make me the very best. And it says, why you succeed using competition. You motivate yourself and others to a higher standard of performance. You can raise a group's achievement level by creating a culture of winning and aspiring to be the best. And, I think when I go back to athletics, I think when I opened up my first training facility, it was about being the best on the field or in the workplace or in the community, that I wanted to be known as the best at what I did. I wanted to be known as the best at what I was doing. And that was really what was important to me, because, I wanted to help people. I wanted to raise my level of performance. I wanted to see how far I could push myself to be the best, and it talks about take action to maximize your potential. So we talk a lot about action, but, action may not be your strength. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but somebody else may be on your team who can assist in that. And that's what this is all about, is really, if we want to maximize our potential, we have to be able to leverage our strengths. And so aim for first place, so you always finish strong. And I think of, different events or different challenges I've done, like Kokoro. I can remember like creating these silent competitions in Kokoro that I wasn't training hard enough to get there. I wasn't training, and challenging myself enough. So I would make these imaginary challenges in my head that as I was going out and training, someone was right behind me or they were in front of me, and I would have to catch up to them. And sometimes it would be, I can remember my son riding his bike where I was running. And so naturally he would get ahead of me and I'd have to chase him down. And I would, I would tell myself, like, eventually he's going to get tired and then I'm going to be right there, to catch up to him. And so I would play these imaginary games, silent games, so that I could give myself perspective on how I can move forward. Now, the other set, it says create daily measures of success for yourself and the teams you're on. Learn what it takes to win consistently. So, big thing for me is tracking my daily habits, making sure that I'm hitting my habits, making sure that I'm hitting my business habits on a day-to-day basis so that I'm winning consistently. And I think a lot of times we don't define the win in our day. And so we have a hard time winning consistently. List the performance scores that help you know where you stand every day. Decide which ones you should pay attention to. So I have performance metrics on what I'm getting done in the day, to what habits I'm doing in the morning, what habits I'm doing in the evening. And what's crazy about all of this is in 2015, I joined a program called Wake Up Warrior. And as I read through this, one of the things that I'm seeing is that really helped me maximize my strengths. That really helped me because everything inside of that was about keeping score. It was about, 90-day challenges. In fact, I even coined a term called challenge-based lifestyle. And it was all about competing every 90 days in these areas. The other part of it is, and so I really, after reading this, I'm seeing that, hey, this is something that really pulled out that competition piece of me that maybe had been dormant for a few years and kind of made it bored. Sports always would pull it out. And now looking back over the last 5-6 years, doing these challenges every 90 days, would pull out that competition side in me. But there's also this other side, is making sure we take time to celebrate our wins. Where there's no victory, there's no celebration. Select tasks, roles, work environments where you can measure your achievements. You might never be able to discover how good you can be without keeping score. And then explain to your coworkers, friends, family that you enjoy battling against good, strong competitors and winning, not from putting others down. And then it talks about your blind spots. So we all have strengths, but with those strengths, there becomes blind spots. So, one of them is being careful not to let our competitive spirit get in the way of our relationships. Where, I could maybe be competing with my wife. I could be competing with my kids, even my kids' friends, or just people who may not, that may be too much for them. Not everyone has your drive to win. So I can think of employees in the past that I may have worked with that may not have that same drive as I do. And I'm expecting them to show up and have that exact same drive, and they don't. Constantly comparing your performance to theirs might offend them or hurt their feelings. And so I can remember even going to the gym at an early age. Guys would ask me to work out with them, and they would tell me a lot of times how much they're working out. And I would make sure that I was going to do double of whatever they did, so that they never felt like, they could keep up with me in the gym. It's like, hey, what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to do 10 reps. And then, they're like, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing 20 reps. They're like, why are you doing 20 reps? I'm like, cause you're doing 10. I'm going to do double what you're doing and I'm going to keep the same pace and do double everything you're going to do. And that made it hard a lot of times to find workout partners who would stay consistently for a long time. The other side of it is winning at all costs isn't winning. It's self-defeating. So make sure you maintain your principles when you push yourself towards your ultimate victory. So I can think of times where, winning was the only thing that really mattered. And so sometimes that meant that, relationships, friendships, winning got in the way of those. And even though you may have won, you didn't win, the overall battle, because you lost maybe a friend, or you lost something along the way, maybe an employee. And so those are blind spots, that I have to look out for. And so, as you're listening to this today, you figure out your strengths, right? And leverage those, but also look for your blind spots, because those could ultimately impact you. But I want you to also know that, hey, comparison is something that is in that competitive advantage at times. And we can compare ourselves to where we've been, compare ourselves to where we are today, compare ourselves to where we want to go, and have people in our life that are fitting in each of those areas. But also have in our life that, hey, I'm trying to be more like Jesus. I'm trying to be more like God. And that's someone who I can compare, or even in situations like, hey, what would they do? What would God do? Or what would, Jesus do? That's the WWJT. But like, what would Jesus do? So I compare myself to how they would maybe show up in the situation. I don't think that's a bad thing. I actually think that that's a good thing. And I think certain situations, but in that we can have blind spots, and in our blind spots, sometimes we don't see that, we can be overbearing. I know at times I have an expectation a lot of times for my kids and my son to, win at all costs, but that's not his strength. Comparing his performance to maybe somebody else as an athlete, and not building him up to that performance. And so there's times where I can see myself do those things, maybe even comparing, how many things I'm doing around the house to how many things my wife's not doing around the house, and keeping score that way, and how, I could punish my wife for doing that. And those are ways that I see show up, or even things around, the office is like, hey, I cleaned the gym, or I cleaned, the bathroom, or I cleaned this area 10 times more than you did. And inside of that, there's this, you can have a kind of a silent competition, but also be resentful and be frustrated with other people in your life because they don't even understand the game that you're playing. They don't even understand the competition that you're playing on the inside. And so those can be times where those are blind spots. But I also want to go through these because, there's two sides of a strength. There's the side where we can use it as a, for this competitive advantage. Then there's the side that we can be overbearing, or maybe use this in a way where we're constantly comparing our performance to others. And think about all the ways that we could compare performance. Performance could be at home, what we're doing versus what someone else is not doing. Comparison could be, my kids, and thinking they should be able to do something that somebody else on the team can't, and then putting a bunch of pressure on them to want to do that. And even in the workplace, comparing, the results of employees. Hey, there's what I could do by myself. You three can't even do this. And how that can actually drive others' performance down, even though it may feel like it's driving mine up. And so these are all ways that we can leverage our strengths, but we also have to watch out for our blind spots in that. We have to know them and understand how we operate in those. And being able to do that allows us to have perspective. It allows us to realize that, hey, my relationships are more important than, the competition at home, or, let's just say it's an unhealthy competition. And that's not where we want to use that in that space. So, but these are all ways that we can do that, right? There's ways that we can compete to be a better husband than I was yesterday, or a better father than I was yesterday, or a better leader in my home than I was yesterday, a better businessman. But then there's also ways that we can overstep that and actually have it hurt ourselves, or maybe see blind spots in that. So, throughout the next couple of weeks, I want to make sure we cover this. I want to go through some of mine, and then hopefully some of you guys will want to go through yours, find your strengths, find your blind spots, and then also inside of your company, inside of your business, maybe inside of your marriage, you can see where you have some weakness, and you can, talk to your spouse about ways that they can support you in that. But also you can see how this shows up in your business, and you can have people around you who will support your weaknesses. And that way you guys can all lift each other up. So I want to thank you guys for being on here today. If you have any questions on this, feel free, reach out, Jesse@habitbasedlifestyle.com. If you're watching the replay, #replay. If you're live with us, thank you for joining, and we'll see you on Friday.
The purpose of this show is to guide you to realign with habits that get you to live the life you've always dreamed of. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with Jesse